Thank you to the chair and the committee for having me. My name is Elif Nur Yıldırım, and today I will be presenting the acute gastrointestinal toxidrome and the new triage algorithm for detection of pesticide poisonings. So this review work addresses a critical blind spot in emergency medicine, the dangerous overlap between common food poisoning and fatal pesticide exposure. The catalyst for this review work was the recent tragic case of the Böcek family, who were exposed to pesticide fumigants in a hotel setting. They presented in ER with vomiting, but were misdiagnosed with food poisoning. Why? First, because the history was silent. They didn't know that they were exposed to a pesticide. Second, the clinical signs were deceptive. The mother noted her children were lying motionless, which is a sign of profound central nervous system depression, distinct from the restlessness of food poisoning, but this was missed. Finally, even the autopsy was a trap. The forensic report noted that there were no traumatic lesions and only gastric hyperemia, essentially a red stomach lining. To a physician, that can look like a simple gastritis, but physiologically, it was metabolic asphyxiation. This confirms that we cannot trust our eyes or the history. We need objective physiology to figure out the real cause of intoxication. And in our research work, we have proposed a new triage algorithm to systematically rule out these potential causes of intoxications, ensuring that lethal cases are identified before it is too late. The global problem is that with pesticides, self-poisoning causes 150,000 deaths annually, and patients present with acute nausea and vomiting to the ER. These symptoms overlap perfectly with benign food poisoning, and clinicians tend to triage for infection rather than toxidromes such as pupil states and shock states. Patients are being sent home with toxins still absorbing. So this means the window is being missed for decontamination, and rapid progression to fatal shock or aspiration pneumonia is being seen. The control group in our work was bacterial gastroenteritis. To detect the causative agent, we must first define the standard gastroenteritis. Physiologically, these patients are stable. Pathology is local mucosal irritation, usually caused from Salmonella or norovirus. Systemic organs are generally remaining intact. The key physiological differentiators here is that hemodynamics, if the blood pressure is low, it is usually from dehydration. And if you give these patients fluids, they respond to it. So the hypotension and the hypovolemia state can change with giving IV saline infusions. Neurologically, these patients are miserable, but they are alert, with Glaxo-Coma score being 15, and sudden coma is rarely seen in these patients. Fever is also common in infections, rare in early non-inflammatory poisoning. For timeline, we know that bacterial infections have an incubation period, and if a group gets sick immediately upon entering a room, that is not an infection, that is from a toxin. For metal phosphides, which is a group of pesticides, these are, unlike other poisons that damage tissue directly, they attack the power plant of the cell. The phosphine gas blocks cytochrome C oxidase in the mitochondria. This stops the cell from using oxygen, causing cellular suffocation and massive lactic acidosis. The patient is effectively suffocating at the cellular level, even if their lungs are full of air. Secondly, the route is important. How does it get into the system? Obviously, ingestion is common, but in inhalation cases, like in the hotel tragedy, we see a unique mechanism called the mucociliary escalator. Because aluminum phosphide is insoluble, the dust doesn't dissolve in the lungs. Instead, it gets trapped in the mucus, being brought up to the throat and swallowed. and once it hits the stomach acid, it reacts with hydrochloric acid and releases a second wave of gas called phosphine. And since this reaction happens constantly, we must move fast and decontaminate the patient as soon as possible. Finally, the signs. The clinical hallmark is refractory hypotension. The heart muscle fails from cardiogenic shock and the blood vessels dilate. Unlike the dehydration shock of food poisoning, this shock does not respond to fluids. If you pour fluids in, the blood pressure stays down. A crucial difference with organophosphates is that they are lipid-soluble. This means that they dissolve in fat and pass right through the skin. If a farmer spills this on their clothes, the toxin will continue to absorb until those clothes are removed. We often see in these cases the secondary poisoning, where healthcare workers get sick just by touching the patient's contaminated skin. Therefore, before we even push the atropine, we must decontaminate the patient first. We should remove all the clothing and wash the patient. If we don't, the skin acts as a reservoir, constantly dripping poison into the bloodstream. And the patients should be looked at for meiosis in the pupils. They should be looked at for hypersecretions in bronchioles and in axilla. They should be looked at for hypersalivation, and they can be seen with muscle twitchings. They should be managed with immediate suction, atropine, and decontamination. The final point for the pesticides is pyrethroids. This is an important concept for triage safety. We call this pyrethroid toxicity as diagnosis of exclusion because the symptoms are dramatic. A patient comes in screaming that their face is on fire, pointing out towards paresthesia. It is important not to skip checking the vitals when leaning onto the skin issues. And our triage algorithm enforces a strict rule: ignore the skin for the first minute. Check the blood pressure and pupils first. A patient with burning skin who is also in shock is not a pyrethroid case. This is a phosphite case. You can only diagnose with pyrethroids as the cause after you have excluded the other killer factors. So this brings us to the solution, the triage algorithm we proposed. In step 1, we don't ask the patient, what did you eat? We assess whether the patient is stable. If blood pressure is below 90 or glucose score is below 15, we then suspect phosphites. And on step 2, if the patient is assessed as stable, we assess the wetness symptoms. We assess whether the pupils are pinpoint or lungs are wet. We can then suspect organophosphates. And on step 3, only if they are stable and dry do we check for irritation from pyrethroids. And if they pass all 3 filters, only then do we treat for gastroenteritis. And when history is unreliable, we can use physiological screens. For when we suspect from phosphites, we can use a silver nitrate test. It turns black in the presence of phosphine gas. It's a rapid presumptive positive that tells us to resuscitate now. For OPs, we use the atropine challenge. If we give 1 mg of atropine and the heart rate doesn't rise, we know the receptors are flooded with poison. So why does this differentiation matter? It's because for the phosphites, the poison is insoluble, it sits in the stomach. Early gastric lavage works because it washes out the solid source before it dissolves or reacts. If we miss the diagnosis, we miss the window to remove the gas factory. For organophosphates, we are racing against aging of the enzyme. We need to give oximes early before the damage is permanent, or else the patient will be dependent on a mechanical ventilator for weeks. And for food poisoning, this algorithm gives us the confidence to safely discharge viral cases, preserving ICU resources. In conclusion, we must move from subjective triage to objective physiological triage. Our algorithm serves as a safety net. It catches the shock early, identifies the wet lungs, and protects the stable patients. We cannot always prevent exposure, but with this algorithm, we can prevent the second tragedy of sending a dying patient home with a diagnosis of gastritis. Thank you for attention.